I welcome you to the Galt Winter Bird Festival. It's our 14th annual festival, and it's a celebration of the amazing diversity of birds and wildlife we have here in California's Central Valley. The festival is a partnership between the City of Galt, the Galt School Districts, and the Cosumnes River Preserve. This festival, we have the pleasure of having our keynote speaker, John Muir Laws. After his presentation, we invite you to take a look at the virtual tours of the Cosumnes River Preserve and also the Children's Art Gallery. We have 4 different tours, including a driving tour, a behind the scenes tour, and then an out of steps tour of birds here in the area. At the preserve, the trails are open, so enjoy this spring-like day if you're in the area, and get out and see the sandhill cranes before they migrate. And we have a tremendous variety of ducks, geese, waterfowl, in addition to raptors, shorebirds. So now's a great time to visit the Cosumnes River Preserve. Annually, about 300 resident and migratory species visit the preserve right here in Galt. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce John Muir Laws. John is a naturalist, artist, educator. He's a scientist and illustrator of several books. And John's mission is to connect people to art, nature, science, mindfulness, and conservation through field journaling. John hosts free programs, trains teachers, leads workshops throughout the country, as well as the Nature Journal Club on Facebook. Trained as a wildlife biologist and associated with the California Academy of Sciences, Jack's received numerous awards for his art, his writing, and his teaching. In this presentation, we'll learn to be better birders and better observers of nature. And he'll be leading a drawing class following this presentation. And so now, John Muir Laws and how to build a bigger bird brain.
John, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here with the Galt Festival, and I wish I were there in person. I want to invite everybody here to join us next year for this as an in-person event, because the biodiversity around Galt is crazy time. Just massive numbers of migratory birds and more sandhill crane than you can shake a stick at. Not that you'd want to shake a stick at them, but it's spectacular and beautiful. So come on out next year and we're going to have a lot of fun. But between then and now, let's practice being better birders, because there are some things you can do which make your birding even more fun. So if you've ever had the problem of, like, you go out on a bird walk and you're like, there's that bird, there's that bird, there's that bird, there's that bird, and then you come back and you're like, I didn't remember any of that. Don't worry, it's not you. Our brains really have a hard time learning that way. And there are things that we can do to help us when we're out there in the field, to let our brain absorb the experience more richly and dynamically, and to allow you to both have more fun when you're out there. So these techniques make birding more fun, and also allow this stuff to stick in your brain in a fundamentally different way. So we're going to be looking at some of those strategies. Normally, when you go out birding, you've got your binoculars and maybe your bird book, and so it's this sort of and also, I was taught really early on that when you're out birding, you shouldn't be talking, because then you're going to scare all the birds away. And so it's this sort of this internal experience. You're out there and there's the birds and there's you, and you're kind of getting your thing on, and that's beautiful and that's wonderful. But there are some real challenges in doing things this way. And I'm not saying you're birding wrong, but I'm going to suggest a few strategies that you might start to play with. And if you intentionally use these strategies, I think you're going to find that the whole experience of birding just blows up and is even more crazy time fun. So the first big challenge about using this thing is that our memories, human memories, are just terrible things. They're terrible things. They, it's, you know, if you're feeling like, you know, I just feel like I'm forgetting stuff. Well, you're human. It's not you, you're human. That's the way our brains are designed. Your brains by design are just regularly forgetting stuff, because what it's doing is your chunk of electric meat is kind of assessing things like, is this going to be essential for my survival? If so, okay, let's encode this. If not, you know what? I can afford to let this go. And so your brain is constantly doing this little calculus of like, should we delete this? Should we delete this? Should we delete this? And a lot of the really wonderful stuff just ends up on the cutting room floor of our little brain. And some of the stuff that gets in there, people used to sort of think of the way our brains work, like when you remember things, it's like pulling up a program on your computer, like you hit open and bloop, here's this memory. But it turns out that the better metaphor for a brain and remembering something is not opening a file on your computer. It's a really, really bad photocopy machine that is mostly out of toner. And so the memory goes in, and when it comes out again, it's a totally different thing. It's this pale ghost of what it was. And then your brain looks at that and they kind of go like, whoa, like that doesn't look right. And so what your brain does is retouches the bad photocopy and fills in all the missing pieces with stuff that it completely makes up. It's called confabulation. So your brain is just like, let's throw this in. And so it feeds back to you this vivid picture. But a bunch of that is confabulated. And so that means that if you then take this confabulated picture and you put it back on the bad photocopy machine, right? The new thing comes out. It's now a bad reproduction of the bad reproduction, and it's going to now be reconfabulated with new confabulation. So that means the more you remember something, the more that it changes. So memories change. And it's interesting, it turns out that the memories that change the most are the ones which we reach for the most often, because we're just sending them through this bad photocopy machine again and again and again and again. And so over time, the richness of experiences, it fades and it morphs. And like you may have probably had an experience at a Thanksgiving sometime when you're sitting around with the family and somebody was telling this story of something that happened to them. And then you're like, uncle, that actually happened to me. And I told you that story. Anybody had that happen to them or seen that happen? Right? So like memory just does, we take other people's stories and we think that that's our own, and then we change these things. So the memory itself is some pretty crazy. And the same is true like with the stuff which we're trying to learn. We're just like taking this stuff and sort of sorting it is nuts, right? So wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to get your memory to kind of stick with things more? Spoiler alert, there is, and we're getting to it. But first, I just want to rag on our brain just a little bit more, because there's another thing that is going on. And that's what's called our cognitive load. Oh, by the way, the stickers, courtesy of Amelia and Carolyn, who decorated my visual aids with their sticker collection. So you'll be seeing lots of puffy heart stickers in this workshop. Get used to it. It's going to be happening. So with the advantage of puffy heart stickers, there's something called our cognitive load. And that's how much stuff your brain can manage all at one time. And the research shows that you can kind of hold in your head about 7 different nuggets of information, plus or minus 2. So sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. You try to do more than that and your brain just goes like, right? I can't handle it. And so it'll just start kicking stuff out. Your brain's not good at managing a bunch of data at the same time. So right now I'm talking to you on an old computer. If I have several different programs open on this computer at the same time, the whole thing starts slowing down and shutting down. And so I have to like close all these programs. Your brain is working very much the same way. You've got too much, you try to manage too much stuff. Like you want all the details, you can't handle the details. That's just the way that our brains are set up. So there's just this limited amount of stuff that we are able to manage at a time. And the stuff which we are keeping in there, it's morphing and changing. And so if you find that it's hard to learn the birds and their songs and all this other sort of stuff, you're not alone. You're human. So wouldn't it be nice if there is something that you can do about it? And friends, there is. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a few of the fruits of study of human brains, and you can look at what that says about solving these problems and how that applies to having more fun birding. So trick number one, this is a really high percentage trick, that if you stare at something in nature, nature just kind of stares back, and your brain's going like, okay, I don't need to memorize this. Like, I'm cool. This isn't going to eat me, and I'm not going to eat it. So basically, I can switch off now. And so a lot of times when we're staring at things, your brain is just kind of out to lunch, kind of going mind wandering. Probably about 40% of the time, our brain is out there just kind of wandering around and not focusing on what you think it's focusing on. And by the way, you can't tell you're mind wandering when you're actively mind wandering. It's only afterwards that you figure that out. So what is one of the secrets to deal with this? The idea is that you want to, it's called externalize your thinking. And what that means is if you're trying to do it all inside your electric meat, it's not going to end up well for you. Remember our problems, right? So you have to get it out of here. And a really good way of doing that is just to say whatever you're thinking or seeing out loud. This is a phenomenon called the production effect, and it's an incredibly powerful tool to get your brain to make observations and things more sticky for you. And here's how it works. The bird pops up in front of you, right? And what you want to do is just start saying everything that you're seeing. So if you're ever out with me in the field and I'm doing this, I'm probably not doing this. I'm going like, oh, okay. The back is sort of a mid kind of mocha gray brown, and on the flanks that color fades to white about 2/3 of the way down. So I'm just going to be saying out loud whatever details that I see, and it's weird to do this at the start because we're trained with the idea that you see with your eyes and not with your mouth. But the reason that this works, is that between your eyes and your mouth is your brain, right? So if things come in your eyes and they have to come out your mouth, they have to go through your brain. And your brain has to attend to that observation enough to activate your mouth to be able to talk and to say these things. And so if you say what you see, so basically here's the idea. If you see something, say something. You've seen that before, right? If you see something, say something. And this works really well with birding or anything that you want to remember. If you verbalize it, those things that you say will stick in your brain much more vividly. And then the bird will fly away and you can say, okay, I saw this and 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 this. And other people will say, well, that's neat. I looked at it. It was pretty, right? You'll still get that it's pretty. It's an absolutely pretty bird. This doesn't take away from your appreciation of pretty birdness, right? But it does allow you to get this whole list of discrete observations that you can articulate, and it'll still be with you after the bird has flown away. So if you want to improve your bird memory, while your bird is there, talk to the bird. And you're going to have to train your birder friends that this is what's going on. This is the new routine. Because we've been often kind of like the culture is like, because you're going to scare the bird away. Turns out, like, if the bird is this close to you, yeah, you probably will scare it away. But if it's like over there where my poster is, and I'm talking like this, the bird is just going to be like, you're not acting like a predator. We're cool. I'm not afraid of you because you're not trying to sneak on me. You're making just a little bit of noise and it's okay. And the bird will stick around and you can talk to the bird. And also you'll be able to hear your birder buddies saying their observations about it. And then you'll notice that when they say something, that makes you then look at that thing that they just said. And you're like, oh yeah. Or sometimes you look at it and go like, actually, I'm seeing that as more of a red brown. And then they go like, oh yeah, okay, that is a red brown there. So you can like, there's this sort of self-correcting thing as you're hearing other people around you. So you're all just like, you're saying what you see. It takes a little bit of getting used to do this. But you're going to find that your ability to remember your observations goes way, way, way up. And in this, your goal is to learn something new. When you're looking at this bird, let's say it's a dark-eyed junco, and you have seen dark-eyed juncos before. Your challenge, oh, by the way, do you guys like the puffy stickers? It helps, doesn't it? So what you want to do is you want to challenge yourself. Like, I've seen dark-eyed juncos before. And in this instance of looking at dark-eyed juncos, can I get myself to see something about these birds that I've never noticed before? So your goal is not just to, the danger is with birding is that we get something identified and then we switch our brain off. Because the names are just something that human beings made up. The bird is the bird. It's this like this wonder that's in front of you. The name is not the thing. But we have a tendency to stop observing once we get the name. Once we go like, oh, okay, dark-eyed junco, what's this next thing over here? You don't want to do that to your brain. What you want to do is to get your brain to engage with the world, because there is an infinite amount of wonder and beauty and just miracle that you can see in a dark-eyed junco if you get yourself just to stick with it. And what you want to do is to look at the familiar thing and try to see something new about it. Can you observe something about dark-eyed juncos that you have never noticed before? Right? Your brain, by the way, when you see something that is new, your brain gives you a shot of dopamine, and your level of attention kind of perks up. So that's why when you see a live bird, you're like, whoa, this is great. Like, you know, that feeling of seeing a live bird, right? So you can actually have that same interaction with your brain on a bird that you are already familiar with. If you really wrap your head around this idea of, I want to see something novel in the familiar. Can I get myself to notice something that I've never seen before in any junco? Or that maybe has been part of these juncos my entire life, but I've never really distinguished it as a discrete thing. And you make that your goal, then your interaction with every bird becomes totally different. It becomes totally different, not just this like, okay, who you are, okay, you're on page 174, got you, boom, let's go on to the next one. So find something familiar, find something new in this critter. And another strategy is to get yourself to actively start to ask questions about whatever you're seeing. So there's a phenomenon in front of you. There's this bird. It's doing its bird thing. And what you want to do is to get yourself curious about it. You want to make curiosity happen in your brain. Not just wait for curiosity. Like sometimes you're out there and like you're like, wow, that's really weird. You start wondering about something. Think for a moment about that physiological feeling of being curious about something, that kind of lean in, right? It's a pleasurable feeling. That actually is a slosh of dopamine. Curiosity is a dopamine-mediated response in your brain. And when it happens, in the presence of that neurotransmitter, your brain starts working better. So your memory is improved when you're curious, and your ability to stick with something, with a task, is improved when you're curious. And so it's great when curiosity happens to you, but because of the way that a lot of us have our experience in school, a lot of our curiosity gets baked out of us. Because if you're thinking that the important thing is to have answers, then asking questions is a vulnerability. And so what happens is, as we go along, the number of questions that we ask goes down and down and down and down. And our engagement with things also goes down. We're not getting that dopamine. Our brain isn't really kind of engaging with it. So the next big task is to get yourself to make curiosity happen. And so when you're out there with the bird, you're going to start with observation. Like, I noticed this and that 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 and that. And then what you want to do is to transfer. You want to move from that into, can you also start to like, I wonder why. So make an observation and see if you can connect a question to that observation. So here's your observation. You want to hook a question to it. That could be, a when question, a how question, a why, a where question, all those sorts of, you've got your who, what, where, when, how, why smorgasbord that you can pick from. See if you can hook a question to this and say that question out loud and start just sort of playing with it in your head. And if you're with a group of people, start to share those ideas with them. And play with the mystery. You do not need to find out the answer. Just the process of getting yourself curious about it, that may motivate you to try to answer the question. But even if you don't answer the question, just getting curious about something for the sake of that dopamine slosh and what it does to attention and memory, all those good things, you want to get yourself curious. And when you do that, the whole process becomes so much more fun, because now you're out there, you're verbalizing these things. You're with your little, cluster of people all wearing masks, and or maybe you're all in the same kind of bubble group, so that you can be closer together to each other, and you're hearing other people's ideas. You're hearing other people's thoughts and comments. You're making your own observations. You're pirating their observations. This makes that process, it's now an interactive thing. We're social primates. We love to interact with each other. So make the bird watching this interactive thing, but interactive more between you and the bird, and your brain and the brains of the people that are all around you. And the experience becomes even more fun. The third little piece that you want to do is to look for connections. So this is a way of stimulating your creative thinking. And you can practice this and develop this when you are out playing with birds. And what you want to do is, when you're there in front of the birds, is you want to say to yourself, what have we seen before that kind of reminds me of this? Right? Is there, something that I've seen birds doing, or maybe even sheep doing, that is kind of like this? I was watching a little girl chase coots in the park, and it just reminded me of a sheepdog herding a herd of sheep. It was this same kind of group behavior. And it just come from watching this starling murmuration, and all those things were swirling around in my head. And so making those sorts of leaps and connections is a really powerful way, and you can do this intentionally, to get your brain to go out and make connections. So you can say to yourself, as you're looking at something, what does this remind me of? And sometimes if you're looking at something, you have to say intentionally to yourself, what does this remind me of? And knowing that prompt will also send your brain on this little curious intellectual journey. The most useful definition that I've heard for creativity is your brain's ability to make useful connections between seemingly unrelated things. So let me say that again, because this is a biggie. It's useful connections between seemingly unrelated things. And your brain might not automatically go there. But if you're just sitting there thinking to yourself, what does that remind me of, right? You're getting your brain to go out and into its network and see what here relates to what I've got going on right here. So these are the three pieces. And I've got kind of a shorthand way of remembering this. We call this, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. And that's sort of my naturalist mantra. That's the birder mantra. You're up there in front of the bird. Start with those observations, right? Then hook questions onto those. See if you can make connections onto those things. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. And then the experience goes from, I'm kind of staring at this bird and thinking like, I got to remember this, like, which one is it? And the whole conversation becomes so much more interesting, so much more rich. Yeah, being able to identify the birds is part of it, and that's useful. But it is only the shallow end of the pool. It's the shallow end of the pool. And you do not have to know the identity of any of the birds in order to use this system. So you can be out there with something like, you're like, I have no idea what that is. Okay, let's just check this out. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of on this. And all the wonders of the phenomenon are there and available to you. You don't need the name. The name is independent of the wonder of the organism. So this is my sort of my ground level recommendation for how to make your birding experience richer. I'm going to invite you to be in active conversation with the people around you about what is going on. And if there's nobody there and you're all by yourself, in active conversation with yourself and your own brain. So when I'm doing this by myself in the woods, I'm saying my notices, I wonders, it reminds me of all out loud. Before, we used to have to worry that somebody would think we're crazy when we do that. Now, everybody just assumes I'm on my phone. So and when you do this, you will physiologically, you'll feel in yourself like, oh, this just got more fun. This is more interesting. And try this. Just be a scientist. Try this out. Try it out and see what happens. And if you try this in a small cohort with your family or your partner, or somebody that is safe for you to be close with right now, try this out together where you both know the system, and then you start kind of riffing off of each other's I notice, I wonders, it reminds me of, and like boom, is next level stuff. And then there's one more tool. And this, I think, is probably one of the best ways, again, kind of going back to the limits of this, of the brain. Remember, we've got our problem with our cognitive load and our the fact that our brain likes to take all of our
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh, I put my...
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
That's what happens when you put your brain on top of your computer and Siri thinks you're trying to talk to it. So sorry about that. I put my brain down on top of my computer, and the things started kind of, bells and whistles started going off. But now we're back. So let's take a look at another strategy that is really critical here. To do this, I'm going to jump over to a document camera that is right next to me here. And let me share that with you. All right. Here is your brain with all of its wonders. Now, Imagine that you are at home for a moment and you are you're working away in the kitchen and you are thinking to yourself, all right, and you've run out of bananas. There's no more bananas in the house. And what are you going to do about it? Well, you could say to yourself, all right, I'm going to remember that I got to get myself some more bananas. And then you're sitting there thinking, got to get bananas, 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 bananas. But then you get distracted by something else. You forget you have to get bananas. And then next time you're at the store, you're thinking there was something that I was supposed to get. What was that? You forget the bananas. You don't bring any more bananas home until the next time you're standing in front of the place where you usually kind of slice up your bananas and you're like, oh, I forgot to get bananas. So what do we all do? Everybody watching this call, we've got a system to deal with that, right? There it is. We make a list. And there's my grocery list. And look at that. There it is, bananas. Put bananas on the list. Bananas is on the list. The next time I'm at Costco, gonna get bananas. It's gonna happen. So a couple of things. Because of this, I don't have to sit here thinking bananas, 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 bananas. I've got it here on the list. And secondly, you know from your own experience that this kind of a list works. This works because we put it down on a piece of paper. I can then think about other sorts of things, and this task is still going to get done. This is extremely powerful and effective. What I've done is I have extended the capacity of my brain's ability, of my ability to remember and to problem solve by plugging this piece of paper into my brain. It used to be when sort of neuroscientists sort of thought about the brain and our thinking, we thought about these brain processes as just sort of being constrained to this. But you can see very functionally here how this piece of paper is a functional extension of my brain's problem-solving capacity. I can consider this piece of paper and the things that I put on it as an extension of my thinking process. You do the same thing when you get out a piece of paper and you solve, if you try to solve a mathematical equation in your head versus getting out a piece of paper and putting it down on paper, right? Or you've got a friend who you can ask about that. Like, well, I don't have that memorized, but I know Sally, that's totally her bag. I'm going to go ask Sally about those conservation easements. And Sally is going to, so Sally is an extension of your brain's sort of problem solving, the way it functionally engages with the world. And what scientists call this is distributed cognition. So instead of thinking of your brains, that your sort of brain experience as just what's happening inside the electric meat, it is going to include this piece of paper. It's going to include talking to Sally. It's going to include all these different things. And because I can get more than 7 plus or minus 2 things on this list becomes an incredibly powerful way of getting my brain to work better. So if it works for Costco and Trader Joe's, it also, and the farmer's market, right? It also works when you're birding. So what I want to encourage you folks to do is this journal is your brain on paper, is to start to keep a journal of your experiences, of as you are going out and observing birds and documenting things, you want to start taking those observations and putting them down in a journal. And at this point, you might be saying, well, that's great if you're an artist, but drawing is not right now in my comfort zone, right? This is not about having to make pretty pictures. Look at this. No pretty pictures. I don't have to make a shaded rendering of the banana for this to be useful. So in the book, what I'm doing is, the reason that I'm using pictures is because, like, look at this. This is a drawing of a little bush. And these are, so here's a little drawing that the bee eater flies out and comes back to the same lookout, right? And it's hard to tell what that is because it's this really scribbly drawing, but it says exposed perch at top of 5-meter tree, right? So then I can go like, oh, that's a 5-meter tree, and there's the exposed perch at the top of the 5-meter tree. So you see how this writing makes this diagram make sense? And then it says like flies out, catching insects, back to same perch, right? I've got a little diagram here of the behaviors that I'm seeing. And it doesn't have to be pretty, but interestingly enough, the more you do this on a regular basis, what happens is if you can't draw and you start making notes like this, in about a year, your ability to draw what you see is going to get better and better and better. It takes about a year, if you've not been drawing at all since elementary school, just to retrain your brain so that when you make a sketch of something, it looks like the thing that you're looking at. And in that, because you're taking notes of birds in the field, there will be mistakes that you make. There will be things that are accurate. There'll be things that are inaccurate. But step by step, it is going to get you closer and closer to being able to observe more accurately and ask more interesting questions and be able to think creatively with your "it reminds me of." So just take a look at this. This page, these pages here are, this is "I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of," just transferred down onto paper. And so like here's I notice. So any one of these drawings is an "I notice." Here's an "it reminds me of." This little bird here, the chin spot baetis. For me, I wrote, what if a shrike took a cutie pill, a cute pill? So that's the shrike taking the cute pill. That's what it reminds me of, a shrike that took a cute pill. And boom, there's the chin spot baetis. I mean, totally cute little bird. And are there mistakes in here? You bet there are. There are tons of them. And I've actually documented one on this page. So when I was out in the field, I saw this bird. I had no idea what it was. I said it's warbler-like, right? But because I'm in this was in Rwanda, totally different environment, like what is going on with this bird? So I then looked it up. So this one, I kind of have a dark line through the eye. So I was out there, I was probably said to myself out loud, dark line through the eye, right? Yellow throat, white breast, greenish back. You know, so I'd be saying these sorts of observations to myself. I then went and looked it up in the field guide, and I found it. And look at that. This is how the bird looks in the field guide, right? And there's what I got in the field. So then I went back out and I found the bird again, and sure enough, it's yellow above the eye. So that's a mistake that I made in this drawing. But that's okay. There's going to be tons of mistakes in this drawing. You're just doing your best to get yourself to look more carefully. But because I did this, I was able to notice and refine this little moment. And if I had just been out there kind of going like, oh, wow, what's cool, what's that? And just trying to remember it in my head, then look it up in the book, I would not have been able to kind of make this little refinement in my brain and move myself just that much closer to an accurate memory and understanding of what this bird is shaped like. So the process of doing this and the mistakes make me just pay more attention and pushes my brain closer to getting this right. So here's another example of that same thing. So here's a spot-flanked barbet. I mean, what a cool, crazy bird. So you can imagine when I saw this with like just stripes everywhere, it's like, oh my gosh, it's this crazy zebra palooza
thing. And so I'm out there doing my observation and I'm saying things out loud. And then the bird flies away. And because I was saying things out loud, I'm able to make this little diagram right here of how this bird looked. And I remember that it had this white bar on the wing. There were yellow lines in the wing. There are some yellow spots on the back. There were these 2 white stripes on the head and went through the eye. Well, later on, I get a better look at the bird. Let's jump down to this one. So you notice this was just your first glimpse. This is going a little bit deeper. And notice what happened with that white bar. Here it was a wing bar. That would have been greater secondary coverts. But the greater secondary coverts, now I get a better look, are actually yellow. That white bar is the scapular feathers up along the side of its back. And so that's a mistake that I made in my book. But by doing my best and documenting what I can, I'm getting my brain to kind of put my nickel down about what I think I'm seeing. And then I've got something where I can then deliberately sort of change my mind. I can deliberately change my mind and get myself closer and closer to an accurate understanding of it. If I wasn't doing this, these sorts of details would just be all this sort of mishmash together. Remember, there's this sort of zebra-y bird. So these field sketches don't have to be perfect. There will be mistakes baked into them all the time. And that's good, and that's okay. Just another example of this. I went to Mexico without a bird book. I intentionally, so I love birds. I love birding, right? But I intentionally left my bird book at home. And I wanted to see just if I'm kind of doing, because I knew there'd be a bunch of birds there that are just outside of my kind of known zone. And what am I going to see? What am I going to be noticed? What am I going to notice? And so here, all right, here we go. Check this out. Look at this crazy bird. Isn't that beautiful? Right? I saw this bird and first got a quick glimpse of it through the foliage and went tearing after it. I had a little spotting scope with me. Up, down, over, around, and through. Finally come to another place. It lands and I get this great look at this bird. And so I'm just geeking out big time. Oh man, this is so cool. Black head. Look at these little feathers off the top and then tail for days. Don't even have enough page to finish that tail. It's going to be like, maybe several inches more on the bottom of this. That's just cool. And then I get a brief glimpse of this other one that kind of looks the same. It's got this thing and this thing, but this is different. I don't know. Is that male, female? I don't know because I don't have a bird book. But what this does is you can imagine how this opens up this little mystery for me. So what's up with these birds and what kind of signaling is going on with those tails? Bird disappears into the shrubs and couldn't catch up with again. But then a few days later, I'm hiking around and who shows up again but this awesome bird? So I grab my journal again and I'm starting to take notes. And I'm doing my best to describe what I see. I'm making my observations out loud. And then I look back here and check this out. Isn't this interesting? So notice this little white bar on the face. See that? None here. So this one definitely had this white bar on its face. This one either didn't have it or I just didn't notice it before. Turns out this white bar is a common part of the features of this bird. It was just a mistake that I made here. There was so much that my brain was trying to suck up that I couldn't get that little white bar as well. That's okay. Books like this are going to be filled with mistakes. And my daughter's glitter glue. Isn't that great? So she had glitter glue, so I put that in there because why not? And look at this. Here's another example of kind of making a mistake, but because I'm putting my nickel down and putting something in my book, it's going to just move me a little bit closer to look again, look again, look again. this thing lands and I see these bold black and white V in the tail. So I said out loud, black and white V in the tail when it's landing. And I made this little sketch right here. And if you look at it, so here's tail fanned when landing. And so there, if you look at my little drawing, I have the dark on the outside and white on the inside. That was just sort of what sort of made sense to me that I should see, because a lot of birds have dark tail tips and wing tips, because more melanin in those dark tips makes those parts of the wings stronger. And so lots of birds. So this is what I would expect. And I had said out loud, big V. But the next time I see it fly, I realized that it's actually the reverse of that, that the V is white. And the black part is this part on the inside. So I just had the mirror image of it. But because I put this mark down, I was able to look at this and kind of sort of notice that, oh no, actually this is it. If I had just been looking at the bird, I just would have noticed, okay, there's this white V, but this little refinement would not have stuck with my brain. So what this allows you to do is to incrementally move closer and closer and closer and closer to an accurate understanding and an accurate description of what you see. A few days later, I find the bird again. Look at this face pattern now. Arc above the eye, below the eye, and this little chin stripe. So each time I'm just moving myself a little bit closer. And I've looked now in field guides, and yeah, they're supposed to have those little marks in the face. I mean, isn't that interesting? That happened because I was marking these things down in my book. So I want to encourage everybody to start keeping a journal. Use words, pictures, and numbers. And this tool will completely change the way that you think and you see. You can hold so much more information in the pages of a book, words, pictures, and numbers, than you possibly can hold in your brain. Your brain is a forgetting machine, and it will forget if you just give it a little bit of time. There have been times you've been out there and you've been looking at something spectacular. You said to yourself, oh, there's no way I'm going to forget this. Well, just give it 25 minutes and see what happens. But the part of your brain, go back to the brain, the part of the brain that is associated with memory is the same structures that are involved in attention. So that which you pay deeper attention to, you've got better chances of remembering. Also, it allows you to kind of hold information in your brain a little bit more and allows you to do neat things. Like this was a painted bunting. So there was a painted bunting. And I was looking at this painted bunting that with the sun behind me, so that the sun was just lighting the painted bunting up like a show. It was crazy. And then the bird flew over at 90 degrees to me. So the sun was at my back looking over 90 degrees. Now it's partially shaded. And I noticed that those colors on it were not as brilliant. And then I walked around so that I was looking at the bird backlit, and I saw that I could still see the reds in it pretty well, but the blue of the head and the green of the back, both interestingly enough, are structural colors, not pigment colors, were much harder to see, but I could still see a little bit of that red. So I could kind of walk around this and look at it from different angles. The journal allows me to record those observations and the changes in what I see. And then, you know, here's my thinking about that. And then I'm wondering, are birds with structural colors, blues and greens, more deliberate about displaying to a female or opponent from direct light? So how does the kind of pigments and colors you have, you see how making these observations prompts me to ask all sorts of questions. If I were looking at a kiskadee, would the kiskadee, which has pigment colors in its tummy, and you know, the blacks and the whites, the browns, those are all pigment colors. Is this one, are the painted buntings more sensitive to light angle when they're putting on their displays than Kiskadys? That could be something that I could check out by direct observation. I mean, wouldn't that be fun? So thinking, what's happening is this book is my thinking on the page.
Jack?
Yes.
This is Beth. I just wanted to say everyone is posting a lot of wonderful comments in the chat saying thank you so much and they're enjoying your talk so much. I wanted to give you a heads up that it's about 8 minutes to noon and the talk goes till 12:30. So people are very absorbed in the talk. There's not a lot of questions in the chat. So if you want to go on for a little longer, and then I'd like to invite people to put questions in the chat if you have them, and we'll get to those a little bit later.
Excellent.
I just wanted to give you a heads up. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for helping me kind of keep track of that in my brain. Let me just show you a few more kind of tools that you can play with something like this. So when I am looking at, there we go. Here we are back in Rwanda. When I'm looking at birds, in addition to sort of initially when people kind of approach things, they're kind of looking at, I want to make a portrait of the bird and figure out what colors are where. And that's fine. That's great to do. That's really fun. And then you're also sort of seeing the structures, like check out the feet on this jacana, just toes for days. Just almost a Dr. Seussian looking little bird. But in addition to kind of getting to know a bird, by the way, when I'm out there, I'm looking at the birds. I'm not thinking of how does this species look. What I'm trying to do most often is trying to show what that individual looks like. What does this bird look like? What is special about it? I don't have to kind of generalize it. And when people are making a field guide, they look at 100 different birds and kind of generalize those together and make this sort of representative bird. But I want to get a sense of this bird. I had in my early development as a birder a wonderful opportunity to spend time with the naturalist Rich Stallcup. He was a wise, gentle, beautiful, beautiful person. And he would get people up there in front of a robin, and he'd say, "What's that?" And people would go, "Robin," and then they'd be ready to kind of run on to the next thing. And then he would stop them, and he would remind them that, how many of you have seen a robin before? And everybody would raise their hand. He would then ask them, have you seen this robin before? And this robin on this day? And what is it that is, birds are actually as unique as we are. Doing my master's thesis on Lasley buntings, I studied under Dr. Eric Green at the University of Montana. And he helped show me that each individual bird on the mountain had its own distinct plumage. And they are as different as you are from me. And all we have to do is train our eyes to look close enough to see those clues. So you're actually kind of, it's an intimate thing. You're getting yourself to just slow down and pay attention to this individual and meet this bird on its own terms. So part of what's going on here is you're getting to know that little critter. And sometimes what I'm doing as I do that is I am zooming in. So if you've got a spotting scope, then you can get in there and just up into the face. Let's see if we can kind of get up in some of these birds' business here. All right. Yeah, check this out. So if you've got a spotting scope, you can get like right up there in the nose of a bird. All right. So you can zoom in and you can also zoom out. If you intentionally change the level of your focus, like if you have a zoom feature on your telescope, don't always be zoomed in, back off. And then step aside from your telescope, look at it through your binoculars, or put your binoculars down and just look at it with your eye. And where is it in the bush? Where is it in the tree? And then imagine yourself floating up above the field where you are and looking down at the landscape. Where is it relative to the creek? Where is it relative to the coastline? Where are you in a larger sense? So if you intentionally add, not just kind of looking at the bird, but the framework of zoom in, zoom out reminds you to kind of get in there and geek out with those details, but also be willing to back out and take in that bigger picture of what you see. Another thing that you can do is to play with behaviors. So not just how does it look, but what is it doing? What is it doing? How does it do those things? So this is, you know, a Geber goshawk that I saw bust into a tree. And what I'm diagramming here is, so let's see, I've got A, B, C, and D. So A, this bird comes swooping in low, flies around to the bottom of this tree and enters down here. And then the tree is exploding with cheeps and all these birds dumping out of it. And then the hawk crawls around inside of the tree, kind of popping up here and there, as if it's kind of like it's got somebody in here that's trying to get to, and it doesn't want it to get out. So it's kind of going around the outside here. Its little victim is still down in there. And after about 3 minutes of this behavior, it then flies off. It did not appear to have something in its talons. So this is my diagram of the goshawk's attack plan and strategy. Right? And these are, it takes, when you're kind of getting, there's the critter, there's also, you know, the behaviors of these things are so much fun. And you'll get these little windows into these worlds. And when you do, go like, oh, this is behavior time, and be willing to switch your focus and attention from, I want to make a portrait of some critter, to, I want to tell the story. I want to tell the story. So in your journal, this is a profound place to kind of find these stories. And yes, you can explore stories without a journal. The only problem there is that when you do that, you're going to forget them. So this journal is a way of then locking this in time, this little moment when you're observing so carefully and deeply. Get those clues in things and keep those clues, keep those observations. The journal prevents the memory from drifting too far from where you were. Confabulation is just part of what we do. And this, on paper, is your best defense against that. One last thing that's really fun to include in your journals is to also play with sound. And if you're saying, but I don't know bird songs, that's okay. You don't need to know bird songs in order to really geek out with bird songs. So check this out. This is, oh, actually, there's a really fun story behind this. Is this one here, or was it? Hold on a second. I'm just going to see the bird that, I want to show you the bird that almost landed me in prison. Well, first we're gonna hit this one, and then we're gonna go to my almost imprisoned bird. So I am hearing these cool calls coming from this tree, and so what I do in my journals is I make these little notes describing the sounds. So let's check this out. So this part is scratchy and harsh. This part here is clear, right? The yokes is clear. Then yoke, right? And so notice I'm using little lines that are bending. The words can go up. So this shows this sort of has a down slur to it, yoke, yoke, yoke. So I'm describing these songs. You can do this with any bird that you encounter out there. You don't have to know what it is, right? Just in your notebook, describe the sounds, put them down using words that kind of in an onomatopoetic way describe what you're doing, and you can have the letters go up and down. You can also add accents and little bendy lines. And then I also have kind of a more descriptive terms of the overall song, like this part is clear, this part is scratchy and harsh. So that would be really cool. And then what happens is eventually you come around the corner and you get a look at the bird and you're like, oh, cool, it's this guy, right? Hey there, there's the tropical bulbul, all right, the boo-boo, the tropical boo-boo, right? So the boo-boo is this bird that is doing this song. But then I'm looking at the boo-boo and it's doing its song. And look at this. So here is the posture in these kind of cool things like this. Hoodoo, 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 hoodoo. So in the hoodotes, the head goes up, and the dote, the head comes down, right? So hoodoo, 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 right? So, but then I'm looking at it and it's doing these things. I'm making these little diagrams and it does this song again, right? And what I do, I'm looking at the birds, it's completely still, and I hear the, and then this bird goes, yook, yook, yook. This was a duet by two different birds. It was a duetting bird. So one bird, and so then in my notes, I've got in blue, one bird is making all the scratchy notes, and I then sit there and I can watch them both. One bird does the scratchy notes, the other one does the clear notes, and it's this duet. So you can see this one does hiss, 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 yurt, hiss, 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 yurt, right? So isn't that fun? So here's this diagram of this, and they both, right? They both could do the hoodote. They would do hoodoo, 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 right? But then when they do these things, it would be this duet. I mean, that's so much fun. So I can play with sound in my journal. And I don't need to know the songs of the birds in my area. But if you do this, the next time I was out there and I heard a hoodoo, hoodoo, I went, tropical boo-boo, right? And then when I heard other ones where I could hear the scratchy and the clear parts, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're duetting again. And I run out there, take a look. Sure enough, there's two birds doing a little duet with each other. Isn't that cool? Right? So sound is just something that birds do. Birds do sound, and it is so much fun. It is so much fun. And you're going to find that you can learn those songs on your own just by running around in your backyard the same way. And the last reason to incorporate journaling into your own bird watching practice is the get out of jail free card, right? So here it is. This was my first tropical boo-boo ever. It is 6 a.m. in Kigali, right? And I am up early with my spotting scope, and I am going out to find birds because I am just so excited. So I'm walking around town. It's early morning. People are out sweeping the streets, and the town is starting to wake up, and the black-tailed kites are coming off their perch, and it's just a beautiful morning. And I hear this low, hollow bugle hinge repeated variable. So look at this. See this, like, here's this song, and there's this repeated variable part, and there's this low hollow bugle part. There's actually must have been a duet going on, but at this point I thought it was all one bird. So I'm writing that, and I look across this fence. There's this fence with this beautiful garden behind it. Beautiful, beautiful garden. And up in the tree there, I see this bird. So I get out my spotting scope and put the spotting scope on it, and there's a pair following each other close through the tree, both vocalizing, right? Sexes alike. So I'm starting to make these sketches. And then, hold on a sec. I look down the street. And down the street, there are 3 men walking towards me. And I think, cool, somebody else is up this morning. And
I'm there, I'm drawing my birds, I'm taking my notes about the little calls and just geeking out and having a good old time. And so these guys come up to me, and the people I met in Rwanda, so friendly, loving, kind. These three dudes had a totally different air to them. These three guys came up and they're like, and they surrounded me. One here, one here, one here, and here. And I'm like, my little, like, my hairs going up on the back of my neck, like something's wrong. This is just like the wrong kind of thing going on. Like, this is not a good situation. What is going on? And and there's like, so what are you doing? I said, I'm watching birds. What are you doing? And they said, we're asking the questions. And I'm like, this is not good, right? And these guys just start grilling me and getting closer. And so I think I'm being mugged. And so I'm kind of, backing up, trying to kind of get myself out of this triad. But these guys, it's almost like they've done this before, like they've got training. And there was and then I look down the street and there's two police officers coming quickly, right? And I'm thinking like, all right, so this is good, right? This is, but these guys aren't running away. No. But so the police officers come and running up, and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you guys are here. Good morning. And they say, what are you doing? And what ensued was about an hour and a half of grilling. Those were plainclothes Secret Service guys and police officers. I had set up my telescope outside the presidential palace. The garden that I was looking into was the president's backyard, and there are serious security concerns. And they weren't buying this I'm a bird watcher thing. And so the conversation is just starting to go downhill. These guys are not really buying that I am out there to watch the birds instead of spy on the president. And they're saying like, I think we should, they would talk to me, and then they would talk to each other. And my Rwandan, not good enough to know, but I could tell that this was not going in my favor, and I did not want to go to jail. And then the tropical boo-boo showed up again. And I decided maybe what I can do is just go all out geek birder. And I said, wait, there it is again. And I took the spotting scope and I put it on the tropical boo-boo, and I looked at it through the spotting scope, and I then dropped down onto the ground right there, and I started making this sketch and drew in front of them live, right? And going like, this is amazing. Like, this is such a cool bird. And then pulled out my bird book. Look, here it is right here. Like, it's got this, like, you see there's two of them, and they're kind of looking at each other. And I think they decided that I was just pretty much crazy and just way into these birds because of this. And they told me to be on my way and don't do any more bird watching in front of the presidential palace. And this is why all of you should keep your own nature journal, because sometimes, in addition to helping you see and perceive so much more, it's your get out of jail free card. So I hope that you've got some strategies here today that can enhance and embellish your own birding practice. If you want to learn more about this process of nature journaling, I've got regular free online classes that you can join in. These are all skills that you can absolutely learn. No prior drawing, birding knowledge required. You can absolutely learn to do this stuff. It takes about a year to kind of get to a really high level of technical competency with it. If you dive in, you can absolutely do it. And I think you just have a ton of fun with it and not end up in prison. So thank you for joining us today at the Galt Winter Bird Festival. We now have some notes.
Can we do some
questions from our audience? And yes.
Great. Thank you so much, Jack. That was a lot of fun.
Glad you enjoyed it.
People are loving the story that you shared about getting out of jail with your journal. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how nature journaling is similar and different from keeping a personal journal. Because I think some people are familiar with that process and maybe nature journaling is new to them. So if you could talk about how those things are similar and different.
Yeah, that is a good point. So the research on keeping a personal journal and diary is absolutely fascinating, and the results are in. And what it shows is that people who keep a diary and a personal journal are more emotionally intelligent than people who don't. There's an extra level of kind of reflection on their life and learning from their own life lessons. And that process of kind of introspection and reflection makes us more emotionally intelligent. And one of the things that people can do to kind of get a higher level of kind of emotional competency is to also just start keeping a journal. So that's shown in the data. That's really interesting. This does sort of the same thing, but not just looking out, it's looking in. I mean, not just looking in, it's looking out and in. So in your nature journal, you're doing, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. And that is going out into the world around you, and you're documenting all those things. And you also can take that same process of I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, and as you're out there having those experiences, direct that back inside. How does this make you feel? What is this? So you're not just kind of connecting like, this reminds me of, the vocalizations of these other sorts of things, but if there's anything in your childhood or other life that this connects to, you can pull those into the same thing. So this doesn't have to just be a rigorous document of birding observations. You can also pull in your personal insights, your feelings about what you're doing. As a scientist, I do this, but I kind of I'm kind of clear of when I'm kind of, experiencing my feelings and when I'm making my observations about nature. So this can cross over very fluidly with the whole with personal journaling, and it's just being a little bit more. I want to be kind of more articulate with what the toolkit is. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. I have words, pictures, and numbers, and those two pieces come together on the page. And that's what nature journaling is. And and can it also include our personal thoughts and experiences? Absolutely. Some people don't feel comfortable going there, and that's okay. And other people do, and that's okay.
Great, thank you so much. We also had a question. What do you think is the best way to start keeping a birder's journal from someone who's never done this before? They're kind of feeling overwhelmed. They see your pages. You've obviously been doing this for a really long time. So how would you suggest someone just start?
I would go and I would go to a art supply store and kind of go root around on their journal shelves and find a little hardbound book that you like, that smells good to you, that feels good in your hand. You're kind of like, I kind of like this. And different people have different aesthetics. Some people like the sleek, modern approach. Other people like something that be kind of like sticking out of Joseph Grinnell's pocket. So you find one that feels right to you. And size-wise, I recommend you go as large as you will realistically bring with you on a regular basis. Because if you don't have your journal, you don't have your journal. So you want to go, but if you have just one of the tiny little pages, yes, it sticks in your pocket, but you can get half of the thought or like the foot of a bird on a page, and then you turn the page, and you have to forces you to kind of do everything like in a little space like that. And that cramps your ability to make diagrams, maps, to express ideas. Like if you had to write War and Peace on little pieces of paper, it was the best of, turn the page, times. It was, it's not going to end up well for you. So having room to kind of spread your ideas out and get, the more that you can get, this adjacent to this and this adjacent, those adjacencies on the page, that's what you're seeing is your thought process coming out and sort of flowing out over the page. And that's really useful.
Great, thank you.
So so that's the physical book. Then what I'd suggest you do is just bring it out with you, and on day one, just walk out there in the morning when you're starting. On the page, write the date, write the location, perhaps the time. I like to put in a little icon showing what the weather is. So I've just put some marks down on the page. And the hardest thing to do in starting is the first page of a journal, that blank page that's kind of staring at you. It can be really intimidating. So very often what I do is I start on page 2. And at some point in the future, you can go back and put something on page 1 or not. But for some reason, it's weird. You start on page 2 and then the journal is just easier to fill. That first page can be really, really intimidating. So don't do that first page. So then when I'm out there in the field though, I'll just put down that little, what we call metadata, sort of the where I am, when it is. So my journal page, whatever I do is now going to be data because it's date stamped and georeferenced. And then when you start to put down anything, your first journal entries of the day are always the most difficult. Your brain isn't warmed up. Your hand is not connected with your eye and your pencil's just rebelling. So in the Nature Journal Club community, we sometimes call these things the sacrificial pancakes. You know, when you make pancakes, those first several pancakes off the griddle, they don't come out. Those are the ones that I eat. And then I'm going to get better shaped pancakes that I can give to the rest of the family. But you want to get those, but you're not going to make pancakes unless you kind of get through those first sacrificial pancakes. So just put things down and just kind of like, oh yeah, these are my sacrificial pancakes. It's going to get better. And then you keep, and if your comfort zone is words, start with words, but just add in a few drawn icons or maps. So you're just getting yourself a little bit to use visual communication strategies. Throw in some numbers, so counting things. You can have lists of things and count those. And what you're going to do is you're going to slowly just start to train yourself to integrate more words, pictures, and numbers together. And there's lots of ways of doing that. It's not about making pretty pictures. It's not about drawing. It's about thinking. It's about observing. It's about helping us remember, helping us connect ideas and connect with the species and the place. The process of doing it will help you connect more richly with nature. And it's not about the product. So you don't want the journal to become precious, like this fetish, this thing to show, because then you're thinking like, I can't do something in it today because like it's not going to work out. I don't have enough time to do something that's pretty. Then you're just limiting yourself from putting down more stuff with this essential thinking tool. So cut yourself slack, be willing to make mistakes. You've got words, pictures, and numbers. I would start with my metadata. Remember those sacrificial pancakes. You're starting on page 2. You've got a journal that smells right and is the right size for you. And then you're going to start, and it's going to work great for a little while, and then you'll just get out of the habit. Oh, by the way, when you first start starting this, it will feel a little bit awkward to squeeze this into what you're doing because it's not already a kind of a natural part of your routines and things. Give it time, and it will be. And once it's, because we're creatures of habit, we do today whatever we did yesterday. So if you did your exercises yesterday, you're much more likely to do your exercises today. If you blew them off yesterday, you're much more likely to blow them off today. So once you kind of get it into your routine, then you're like, oh, I've got this habit, and just don't break the chain. And then when you do, it's okay. Just start again. And then just start again. And don't think like, oh, I have a terrible nature journal. I started this thing and then I gave up. I guess this isn't for me. Just kind of like, got out of the routine. All right, no big deal. I'm going to start again and start again.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. We had a couple questions about how much you do in the field versus at home. And someone is wondering if you have like a small journal you take in the field and then you have a bigger one at home that you kind of expand into. If you could talk a little bit about that, like what are you doing in the field versus later touching up your journal pages, et cetera?
Different people have different ways of doing it. I find that when I take a small journal out into the field and try to transcribe that, I never do the transcribing. And then I feel bad. I feel like I'm behind on all this stuff that I should be doing. And so I just have one journal that I do real time. I don't do that process of do something and then transcribe it. Because also if I'm making a really careful diagram of that, I don't want to do that twice. The best one is going to be the one that I did when I'm in front of the phenomenon. And the second one that I can do can be only as good as that if I copy it exactly, and everything else will just be a confabulation. So I try to do as much as possible from life in the field. So I'm not taking photographs. I'm doing all my stuff directly from life in the field. Sometimes I don't have time to finish something in that moment. And then I will try to, that night by lantern light, try to fill it out. But I know that I'm going to be tired then. And so I try to do just as much as I can from life in the field. I'm going to just jump over to the journal right now, and we'll just do a kind of a page flip. And I'll see most of it. You're going to see it's stuff that I all right, so let's see. These are, zoom out. Yeah, all this was done from life in the field. All these ones here. This little map I did, I went to Google and I kind of got an overview of this pond and made this. So that was done entirely at home. This all in the field, this all in the field. Yeah, a lot of this stuff, all done in the field. So here I didn't have time to add color to it. And if I zoom down here, you see that this has red, brown. There's an RB right in there. There's a little B over here. This was blue. So sometimes I've got little color notes that are drawn in on something. Let's see if I can find more of those. Oh yeah. So while the bird was there, I was putting in that this was yellow. I've got there's a little bit of pink on the feet, a bit of yellow in this collar here. There's an R that you can barely see in here. That was for sort of a rusty chest. And so those notes, then, I could do those ones later on. These ones here, I finished the color on these ones at home. So that's just sort of, I'm sitting down. When I'm finished, oops, I've got to zoom back out. Sorry about that. Yeah, so these ones here I finished at home. So it's the brushwork can be a little bit more controlled. I'm sitting at a table, but very often just like the hue of the green will be off in pictures like that, because I don't have a way of checking those colors against reality. This one I think I colored at home. I put the paint on, but the colors were pretty straightforward. It was a gray back, a little red brown, and so I've got a buffy patch here. So that wasn't too complicated for me to do at home. This, I went out to a little island that had a bat colony on it, and then all the fruit bats fly out off that island as night comes in. And so this was, I was, squatting on a kind of, on a slippery area on an island. It was interesting, called Napoleon Island, because it kind of looked like a little Napoleon hat. But the color I then added to this, but you see the color here is not anything really
special. It's just sort of adding some dark values in. Those were fruit bats, really cool. So most often I am, that one was colored at home. But most of these, I'm putting in the color in, putting the color in live in the field.
And someone was asking, you're mostly using watercolor in these, is that correct?
That's right. So these are watercolor paintings on top of ballpoint pen. And this is just using a soft colored pencil, a black grape Prismacolor pencil. Went off to a mountain gorilla colony. These mountain gorillas were all done from life in the field. And I think I added some of the color later on.
So we just have about 2 more minutes before your time is up. And I know you have another class at 1 o'clock. Some people are asking for that link. So I have put it a few times in the chat. I'll put it again in the chat right now. And there is plenty of room for that class, which starts at 1 o'clock. Is there anything else you or John would like to say before we wrap up?
I guess my big message to you is that I want to just encourage you to experiment with some of these approaches and see if what it's like to adopt those into your birding practice. I find for me that it just adds levels and levels of richness, because my capacity to do something just between my ears is really limited. It makes my brain so much more expansive and capable and playful if I am able to externalize my thinking, to get it out of my head and onto a piece of paper. That paper then does part of my thinking for me. And the way you think on paper is different than the way you think between your ears. And you've probably seen the same thing, like, you know, that it is a better form of thinking. You've probably had a friend who is, you know, like going through a breakup, and they're just sitting on their couch and they're just ruminating, and they have a feeling of kind of actively engaging with their experience. But it's not until you come over and you make a pot of tea and you sit down and you talk to them about it, and they're able to say these things. And then when they just start repeating themselves again, they can hear themselves doing that, and they're able then to kind of go on to the next thing and then expand beyond that and expand beyond that. But before you came over, they were just kind of in a little circle, kind of just ruminating. And you're able to get them out of that and then help them move on and forward. That's because it got out of their head, and we're using this distributed cognition idea. It's now this thinking about this and problem solving it is now a relationship between you and them. In the same way that thinking about the bird is a relationship between you, the bird, your brain, the piece of paper, and you've just got this more expansive tool. You try to work a math problem out in your head, it's not going to work as well for you as if you put it on paper. The same is true about any task that we're doing. And you're going to, and it's fun to play with your brain this way. So your brain is the greatest untapped sort of organ of pleasure in the human body. And being able just to go play with your brain and see what it can do, it's really, really fun.